Good afternoon and welcome to our Wednesday webinar. I'm going to be sharing my desktop today and we're going to go over how to invoice out of the Prophesy system and then eventually transfer those invoices into the QuickBooks file. And we're going to tie in a little bit of the document imaging and some of the new functions that we have available in the Prophesy system with the latest update. We're going to start here underneath the accounting menu under Print Post Freight Bills. This billing window here contains all of my list of completed loads that I've been working on. All of these loads, as I select them, have details about the information for revenue, shipments, load assignments, and load itineraries down at the bottom. So as you're working in this screen, you can select the individual loads that you want to make your invoice copies of. We can attach documents to them if you have any scanned documents, like proof of deliveries or bill of lading forms. And if there are updates for any of those invoice amounts at the bottom, we can type over the dollar amounts to change the rate or add additional charges, like maybe a detention amount. These will update the totals on your invoices so that when we print them, we'll have the extra amounts. I can select as many invoices up here in the top section of the screen as I'd like to work with at one time. I can also use these filters up in the top part of the screen for Bill to ID to limit the information you see on the screen by one customer or a certain posting status. The eligible to post items are going to be anything that are unprinted or printed, so anything that has not been posted yet and transferred into your QuickBooks file. There's also a date function right here that allows you to filter out invoices by their billing date, the due date, posted date, or the delivered date of your load. We're going to talk about two kinds of invoices. We have a filter here for freight bills and a second filter for master bills. The freight bills are the individual invoices for each customer's order or shipment. When I select an invoice in the list, as long as I have revenue amounts at the bottom, I can click on the print icon up in the toolbar to preview a copy of what that invoice looks like. Once the preview is on the screen, I have an option to export the invoice into an Excel file. I can use my rendition or printing icons to print a copy of the open invoice, plus any required documents, or I can use my email function to attach this invoice, plus my required scanned documents to an email. When I close the invoice, it asks if it printed correctly. I say yes, changes the status of that invoice into the previously printed status, and changes color so that we know which ones have been printed. My last step in a simple processing world is to click on the post icon up in the toolbar and eventually transfer that through to QuickBooks. For the document imaging part of it, I may want to attach a proof of delivery or a bill of lading form or other documents that go with that customer's invoice. This rendition column shows if I have any requirements attached to that customer file. I'm going to use this customer here as an example. For All-Star Freight Service, I have some of their loads in this list showing as okay, and some of the loads are showing incomplete. The loads that show okay mean that I have attached a document that meets the requirements for this customer. Incomplete means that I have not scanned anything against that customer's invoice that meets my requirements. To attach a document, I can click on the imaging icon up in the toolbar, or I can double-click inside the rendition column. That'll open up my scanning window, where I can scan and directly attach a document, or I can use the Attach tab to find a document that I have saved out on my server and attach it directly to the invoice that I have highlighted. When I attach the image, I'm prompted for the type of image that I'd like to attach. I can choose the image type, enter any notes or ID, and then click OK. My Images tab shows me any of those documents that are attached. The requirements document button at the top shows the requirements that are set up for this customer. So for all Star Freight services, I can click the requirements button, and I can see here that the bill of lading is the only required document. If I was to email a customer a copy of their invoice using the email rendition option, it would only attach the bill of lading and not the load confirmation that I just attached. Only the required documents are sent with the invoice. Once the documents are attached, if all of the requirements are met for your customer file, it'll change to the OK status in the rendition column. The ones that are marked NA mean that they're not set up with any requirements. You can still scan and attach documents to those invoices and bill and post those loads. They'll just show NA here for the rendition requirements, and when you email, it will only email the invoice. These two invoices here have been marked OK for this customer. So if I select both of those invoices, at the bottom part of the screen, I can check my flat rates, my fuel surcharges, and any other additional charges for each of those invoices. Now I can click on the print icon in the toolbar, and I can use my email rendition option to create an email and attach the documents plus my invoice to the customer. I can either type in the customer's address or click on the To button to go into a list of any previously saved emails I have on file for that person. This email function uses my Outlook as my default email program. I would send it through my normal email account. All the documents are attached as one image file, so it's easy for the customer to receive that and to open it up. Once the email is sent, I'll close the freight bill window, and I'll click Yes to show that those invoices have been printed or emailed successfully to the customer. And then my last step is to use the Post option up in the toolbar to post a copy of those invoices and send them to QuickBooks. This posting function moves them off of the Print Post Freight Bill screen because of the posted status that's selected at the top. When I view the previously posted status options, I can see that those two invoices are there in my screen. One of the newer functions that we have available in our Print Post Freight Bills window is the option to reverse a posted invoice. This reverse function allows you to update the charges on the customer invoice or anything else about the load, and then reprint, mail it to the customer, and repost. At this point, nothing is actually transferred to QuickBooks. After the posted invoice is in this list, I can transfer to QuickBooks by opening up Accounting and run QuickBooks Export. I'll select the company for QuickBooks that I want those invoices to transfer to. And the checkbox here for invoices and transactions is marked because I posted the two single invoices in my accounting window. I have my QuickBooks file already open in single user mode, and I'm logged in as the administrator. So all I need to do to get those invoices to transfer is click Process All. Those invoices are transferred successfully into the QuickBooks file, and I can view those invoices by switching to QuickBooks and looking at my customer. My transactions are to the right, and when I open the invoice here, I have the details for what I had on Prophesy side transferred over into the invoice in QuickBooks. The description section within the invoice in the QuickBooks file can be controlled by some settings that we have on the Dispatch QuickBooks interface. If this is showing too much information, or if you'd like to add some other things, like a bill of lading number or shipper reference number, back underneath the Prophesy system, on the Dispatch QuickBooks interface, there's a Settings button here. This Settings button controls different things that we'll be able to transfer on the invoice when it's sent to QuickBooks. In the AR invoice options, we've got an invoice memo field and the invoice line item description field. I've chosen to put all of the information that I'm transferring to the invoice in QuickBooks in the line item description. However, you can also add things into the memo column if that helps as well. This section on the left is also a newer function that allows you to grab any payment information and credit limit data from your customer records and your AP information for vendor records and bring that back into the dispatch system. The benefit to doing that is better control on your credit limits for your customers and also being able to see whether an invoice has been paid on your Prophesy system. Usually that's something that you'd only be able to do on the accounting side. If I take a look at a load that had already been posted in the past and transferred to QuickBooks, I'll be able to see up here at the top of the screen that there's a little red posted option and a paid button. If the invoice was paid, I can click on that button and I can see all the details for those payments. If it was partially paid, it would say partial paid, and I'd be able to see the payment dates and how much was still remaining as a balance outstanding. My credit limit information and the AR balance for that customer and the average number of days to pay is also displayed on the load now that I've done that import. After transferring the information for that invoice that I just posted to QuickBooks, if I wanted to make a change, I'm going to come back into the Print Post Freight Bill screen. The previously posted invoices are under the posted status called Previously Posted. Here's one of those invoices that I'd sent to QuickBooks earlier. If I right-click on the screen, there's an option here called Reverse Freight Bill. This reverse function opens the invoice and unlocks it. So let's say I forgot to add my detention charge. I can put a line item on there, add the charge amount, and I can click on Save Load. That save option locks my load back up and gets it ready again for printing and posting. After I've made my changes, the reversal transaction is added to my Dispatch QuickBooks interface. The reversal function that's going to happen when I transfer these over into QuickBooks is it will void the original invoice amount. It also takes it off of my previously posted status window and puts it back under my eligible to post. Here's the load that I just did. At this point, I can print a copy of the invoice again, re-email it or print it and mail it to the customer. Then I can close. I'll say yes, that it printed correctly. And I'll click the post button one more time. This will queue up that new load with my added detention charge into my QuickBooks interface. So besides my reversal transaction to get rid of the old invoice amount, I'll have a second posting that will transfer over my new invoice amounts. I'll close this screen one more time. I will run that QuickBooks interface screen, and we'll send over the new transactions. My check mark is next to the Invoices and Transactions category. If I'd like to preview what will transfer before it happens, I can right-click on that checkbox, and it'll show me my new dollar amounts for that invoice that I posted. There's also a checkbox here at the bottom for my invoices and reversals. If I right-click on that checkbox, it shows the reversals that we'll transfer to. I'll click Process All to send those on to QuickBooks. And once that finishes, we can take a look at the QuickBooks file one more time. And for that customer, I've got 2 line items now for my invoice number 1122. The original invoice amount has been zeroed out because it's voided. Void is down here in the memo column on that original invoice. And my new invoice is listed with the updated dollar amounts. It's added the detention onto it now. That was the process for a single invoice to transfer over to QuickBooks. The next function we're going to talk about is your master billing function. Under the accounting section in the same print post freight bills window, we're looking by default at a list of all of our single invoices. If I have a customer that prefers a weekly billing or a group of loads to be included all together onto one invoice, I'll switch the invoice type at the top to master bills instead of freight bills. This master billing function relies on your customer setup. Within the customer, there's a checkbox that activates your master billing function. For the green Subaru company that I'm working with in my print post freight bill screen, this checkbox right here at the bottom of the customer form shows that they are eligible for master billing. In the print post freight bill screen under the Manage Master Bills area, I can create a new invoice or master bill for them by right-clicking and going to Manage Master Bills. This screen brings up any bill to customers that have been marked to use the master billing function. I'll select the customer that I know I need to do my weekly billing on. Any of the individual pro codes or loads that I've been working on for that customer are displayed at the bottom. This grid can be resized, so if there's too much or not enough information on there, we can widen or shorten those columns, and we can drag around the columns that are here. If the actual delivery date for billing is the most important thing, that should be something that you display right in the beginning. The top section of this screen is where your new master invoice will be created. On the right, I'll click the button that says Create, and my next available master bill number is automatically added. Click the OK button, and I can decide at the bottom now which individual pro codes or invoices I'd like to group together onto that master at the top. Before your last update, the way to get these invoices on that master was to click on the row and drag it. With our newest update, you have the ability to instead select the checkboxes next to the rows or hit the Select All button if you want all invoices to be grouped together on the same master. Once they're selected, I'll click Assign All Selected, and it will confirm that I want to put all of those individual invoices on that master. The master bill ID number is filled in the rows at the bottom. If I made a mistake and want to remove one of those individual loads from that master, I can check the select box and click Remove All Selected. And that will remove that one line from my master invoice. When I've finished modifying what my master invoice will contain, I can click on the Done button on the right. That adds a row into my main print post freight bill screen. This is very similar to the functions that we have in your regular print post freight bills window using the freight bills option. I'll select the row that I want to print the copy of. If there are documents that you'd like to attach, we can use the imaging icon to do that. At the bottom, I can verify that all of my loads and dollar amounts are correct. And then I can preview a copy of the invoice by clicking on the print icon. The master bill is part of a different style of invoice that you can choose in your preferences. If there's something that you don't like about this style of invoice, we have several different styles that you can choose from. The same is true for your individual invoices. The same export and printing and emailing options are also available within your master bills. Once you've attached your documents and printed a copy of the invoice or emailed, you can close, and the system will confirm. We can click yes, and it changes to the light blue printed status. Once again, the last step here is to click the post icon, and the posting process will put this into my Dispatch QuickBooks interface screen. It moves off of this window until I go to the previously posted records, and I can look at those or reverse them if necessary here too. The reversal on a master invoice is a little different than the freight bills. If I right-click and choose the reverse master bill option, it confirms, and it brings up my Manage Master Bill screen. In this case, I can remove one of these items from my master, or I can drill down into the individual load to update the charges on one in particular. If I decide to remove all selected, click yes, and it removes my master bill ID number from that row. If I click done, it will update that line. Moves it off of my previously posted status and puts it into my eligible to post records. And from here, again, I can print and then eventually post and transfer it over into my QuickBooks file. I'm going to repost that one more time. And we'll send it through onto QuickBooks. One last thing we can talk about in the freight bills option is the force date when printing. A lot of my accounting people like this. When I clicked and select an invoice previously, I didn't set a forced posting date. So the date that it used for the billing was today's date. And then according to my customer terms, it created a due date for me on that invoice. If I wanted to force a date, I can control when that invoice will post the revenue into your QuickBooks file. So if I choose to put this revenue in March, when I print a copy of the invoice, it will use March 31st as my posting or printing date. And when it transfers to QuickBooks, it'll put it into March instead of April. Now we'll close here, and I'll transfer the invoices through onto the Dispatch QuickBooks interface. Accounting, run QuickBooks export. My checkbox is marked again. We'll click Process All. These invoices are then transferred over to QuickBooks where they can be reviewed. The customers and jobs and the revenue types are not checked in the two cases that I sent over the invoices, and that's because I had previously processed those items. With the processing settings that I had chosen originally, I had decided to use the Prophesy default accounts. So when the invoice transferred over into my QuickBooks file, it uses the items that Prophesy created. If that's not what you'd like to do, we have another option for the Dispatch QuickBooks interface. Instead of using the items or the accounts that are associated with the items in the Prophesy system, we can attach your own chart of accounts to the items that Prophesy creates. Each one of the dispatch revenue types is created in the item list and associated with an account. You can change that account here in your QuickBooks file by right-clicking and going to the Edit Item option. You can also change the way that your accounts are set up by switching the preference settings on your Dispatch QuickBooks interface. The Settings button that I pointed out before, where I activated my import for the AR balances and the data that would transfer over onto my invoice, there's an Accounts option at the top. With the Accounts option, I have default accounts selected. I can switch that to Custom Accounts. If I choose to use Custom Accounts when I process a new revenue type from the Prophesy system into QuickBooks, it will prompt me for the account that I want to use for that transfer. I can also use this Modify Accounts button at the top in order to redesign or redistribute my revenue or payment accounts to a certain place. So far, we've been working in the revenue section. So if I click Revenue Accounts and then Show, it'll show me everything that's been processed in the past for each one of the charges that I've included on an invoice. If I prefer to have my fuel surcharge pointing to a different location other than the specific item called fuel per mile, I can click the drop-down box in the status column and I can switch that to initialized. I can click Save at the bottom, and the system will clear out the target QuickBooks account and the QuickBooks ID. If I exit, I have a checkbox that's been marked now under my revenue types and accounts. If I process now, the system should prompt me for a new account. It's necessary to assign a revenue account to that Prophesy fuel per mile item. We've already sent over invoice accounts when we set up the original connection. At this point, I'd like to change the one for the fuel per mile. At the bottom, I can click on to add a new account by creating my own, or I can choose to add an account from the existing list that I have in QuickBooks already. If I click Add Account from QB, it changes the right side of the screen so that I'm looking at the accounts that are already set up and not already imported. I have one here called Fuel Surcharge. So I'll select that one and I'll click Save. That will update my list on the left so that it's now available to be assigned on the right next to my fuel per mile. If I drop that box open, I can select Fuel Surcharge and I can click Save Assignment. When I close this window, it'll finish the processing and it'll update my revenue type over in my item list in the QuickBooks file so that fuel per mile is now pointing to fuel surcharge instead of the trucking revenue with the sub-account fuel surcharge. That option is only available if you're using our custom accounts option. If you've chosen to use the default accounts option, Prophesy will take care of creating the accounts for you. Along with posting the invoices, we can also attach a class to the invoice. In my processing options, under the settings, I've chosen to class track by trailer. One of the more common options is to track the classes by tractor. And on the QuickBooks system, that would allow you to print a report called the Profit and Loss by class. On the invoices that I've sent to QuickBooks, if I review them one more time, the class will show on the invoice as long as your preferences have allowed it. The Use Class Tracking option needs to be turned on here so that my class column displays on my invoice. In my case, it had to do with a trailer, but typically it could be a tractor or it could be a driver or driver group. Okay. Last thing on the QuickBooks interface that we can do when you're initially setting up your accounts, or if your accounting people prefer to create new customers in QuickBooks, we can use the QB Imports button in the top left to go out to QuickBooks and import those customers. We can also import vendors, employees, or other accounts without having to process first. If I choose Customers and then Show List, we'll make a connection to the QuickBooks file that we have open, and it will bring up a list of any of the customers that have not previously been saved in the Prophesy system. You can individually select them or click Select All and then Save. That customer is saved in your customer list in Prophesy, and it's removed from the import list. So if I click back on the same QB Imports and customer list, the JBJ Services customer is gone. Once imported into the Prophesy system, that customer can be updated under the Maintain menu in the customer file. You can locate that customer and update anything necessary here, such as bill terms, credit limit, rates that might be attached to that customer, and the master billing function. These last two options in the customer file control the different types of freight bills or master bills that this customer might prefer. As an overall, in the Preferences section, we have one invoice and one master bill type. If your customer prefers a different style, we can change the freight bill type here and assign that specific freight bill type to this company only. Master bills as well. For the overall settings for billing, we can look at the Preferences and the Billing Defaults tab. Your freight bill type is set to standard. The same list of freight bills were available in your customer file, but the freight bill type here will cover any invoices for customers that don't have a specific type defined. If you'd like to see a different style of invoice, you can highlight the one you'd like to look at and click the Preview button just to the right. It will preview with the new style. We also have some checkboxes at the bottom that control whether your driver, truck, or trailer, mileage, or the Bill To ID will print on that invoice. These checkboxes are unrelated to the style of invoice. For example, if I uncheck Resources on bill and click Preview one more time, my driver, truck, and trailer have been removed from that invoice without having to switch to a different template. I can also add a thank you message, and I can set all my customers to the same terms.